Canberra political reporter Cam Reddin's with us, and in Sydney, my old mate from the Daily Telegraph, James Willis. US President Donald Trump, he signalled the 90-day pause on his sweeping tariff regime. It's going to end within a couple of days. He says he'll be sending out letters with the tariff amount. Here's what he said.
We'll look at how a country treats us. Are they good? Are they not so good? Some countries, we don't care. We'll just send a high number out. But we're going to be sending letters out starting pretty soon. No, we don't have to meet. We understand. We have all the numbers. Listen, what we're going to do is we're going to send, and we're going to say, congratulations, we're allowing you to shop in the United States of America. You're going to pay a 25% tariff or a 35% or 50% or 10%.
Cam, I didn't think people sent letters anymore.
Least of all the President of the United States, Steve. Look, I think there's a little bit of theatre in that. The way it's been put to me is that the Prime Minister, the Trade Minister, they're not sitting next to some Australia Post box waiting for Donald Trump to write to them. We are getting the 10% tariff, that's for sure. The efforts to try and get out of it somehow will continue. There's still efforts at the diplomatic level, at the Treasurer's level, the Foreign Minister going over again to Washington this week, but we're not going to get out of it. Seemingly, most countries aren't. I might share some insight that was given to me this afternoon as well, Steve, on the way that this is playing out behind the scenes between Australia and the US. There is a lot of focus, and naturally there would be, on the fact that the Prime Minister hasn't yet had FaceTime with President Trump. The way that this tariff negotiation is playing out, the way it's been put to me is that there's even been some acknowledgement from US officials, perhaps giving some advice to the Australian officials, saying there is so much on their plate at the moment, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to keep your head down and not attract the president's eye should he perhaps see something else that he doesn't like and decide to raise that tariff figure. Naturally, there's a much greater focus on the US end on China, potentially a further extension. Is that on the table? The UK, they've just signed a free trade deal, or a new deal that was many years in the making after Brexit. And then there's the European Union, which is even more complicated. So, Steve, perhaps that goes some way to the reasoning that Australia hasn't necessarily been thumping the desk over these tariffs. It is the lowest level. Yes, it is 10% reciprocal. There will be an impact. There is even one school of thought, though, that because Australia is at the lowest level, if these tariffs really do cause something of a chaos agent effect in the global economy, and there's problems in Europe, there's problems in Southeast Asia and elsewhere, does that actually make Australia a more attractive market for others to buy more of our goods and therefore get more money into our economy? So obviously this is complicated, Steve, but by all the noises coming out of both sides, it does not look like we're getting a free pass at all.
James, the problem for the PM, of course, is, it's good and well for American politicians to tell us to keep our head down, but politically, Anthony Albanese's dying a death by 1,000 cuts because he's seen as being weak, and he doesn't have, the phone call that he needs with Donald Trump, or much less the face-to-face meeting.
Well, Steve, I'm not going to blame the PM entirely for this, because based on what Cam has said and what we've read about this saga, it would have been very, very hard for Australia to avoid this. And as Cam just said, we've copped the 10% tariff when it could have been worse. However, there is absolutely no doubt that the Prime Minister has some work to do on his relationship with America. And I think that goes back to the inauguration. I mean, it's easy to sit here and talk in hindsight, but the PM didn't go to Donald Trump's inauguration. I think he should have gone. That would have been a good starting point. And clearly, in the time since, they haven't been able to have any of those proper meetings that they intended to try and bring this to the front. At the same time, you've had reports today about some issues around the ambassador, Kevin Rudd, and a perception in America, whether it be Trump or people in Trump's office, that Kevin Rudd is not well liked. And we know that he's made a number of high-profile comments about Donald Trump previously. So you have that factor. And so there is a serious bit of work here to do. Now, we know the Prime Minister has had no issue getting on a plane during his first term in government. I think this will be the easiest one when he does get this meeting to get on a plane and finally sit down with Donald Trump and go through this. And look, let's face it, no matter what you think about Malcolm Turnbull, the relationship between Malcolm Turnbull and the President, and also largely Joe Hockey as ambassador, allowed us to avoid these tariffs when they popped their heads up under the first Trump presidency in 2016. So Malcolm Turnbull and Joe Hockey got the job done here. We're a long way to go, and clearly that relationship needs some work over the next few months.
Yeah, even Arthur Sinodinos did a great job. But don't get me started on Kevin Rudd. You'll never shut me up if you start taking me down that track. Hey, Cam, China, the ambassador here, he's always been very high profile. He's come out, a piece in The Australian today, and said, the Australian government shouldn't increase defence spending. It would place a, quote, heavy fiscal burden on the budget. What's it got to do with him? Why would we care what he's got to say?
Well, it might well do that, Steve. I mean, the Chinese ambassador, as the Prime Minister pointed out today, he is there to speak on China's behalf, and the Prime Minister saying that he will speak for Australia's behalf and not really elaborating on that. Clearly, this is a friction point going back to the US-Australia relationship, because this is what's really got it in the fore of where Donald Trump wants us to be. You've just seen NATO meet that, bar Spain, 5% annual GDP spend on defence, which is tens, probably hundreds of billions of dollars above what we would spend every year. The Prime Minister points to that new line of spending in the budget. $57 billion is what's allotted for this year, and it is trending up. But the government maintains, Stephen, this is kind of where the debate seems to be going, that they don't want to set an arbitrary figure, in their view, what is an arbitrary figure, and then work up to it. They want to target project by project. It's difficult when the budget's in the red, though, and of course, I guess going back to the core point, that of should we raise defence spending and what do we spend it on, the government would certainly be wary that defence is a pressure on the budget. It's one that there's an appetite globally for more spending on. The challenge is, as it always is, you've got to find the money to do that, and that's a challenge the government's well aware of.
Cameron, James, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you again shortly.